Hi. You're going to have a very excited moderator because this has become one of my favorite books of the year. So for those of you who feel the same way and have read Deviants, please just give a huge round of applause to Shantanu who's right here. Yeah. And for those of you who have not yet read the book, give yourselves a pat on the back for you're just about to discover something amazing. So you're here and welcome. We're going to have a great time on this panel. Like I said, Deviants has become one of my favorite reads of the year. It is a pleasure to be wrapping up my year reading this book. I myself am an author, and I am known for putting down books very, very quickly. If I don't enjoy something by the 5th or 10th page, I put it down, but I finished Deviants. So that is a huge, huge undertaking for myself, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So we're here today to talk with Shantanu about it. Very briefly put, I will use this time in a way where we're in conversation, very flowing, very naturally. And then what we're going to do is leave about 10 minutes for Q&A. So those of you who have questions can ask us questions, all right? So Deviants is a book that I will let Shantanu actually introduce himself. What I will say is it spoke to me as a fellow author and as somebody who loves books because I think it has a lot to teach us, both in terms of craft of writing. It uses 3 voices, which is very, very, very hard to accomplish because you might lose an author at any point if one of the 3 voices doesn't work. But what Deviance does really well is it makes us commit to every single voice, and it shows us that every single voice matters and every single voice makes a lasting impact. Okay, so from the perspective of craft, there is already voice to be studied. From the perspective of themes, I think that we are in a society that continues to marginalize so many populations, and this is a book that really brings out the lives of queer men. And what's very, very interesting is that we follow 3 generations of queer men, and they each have uncle-nephew relationships. That is not a kind of trio that we typically find in literature today, and thus far to my knowledge, I know no other book that studies 3 generations of uncles and nephews. So with that said, I'm going to let Shantanu tell us more in his own words what this book is really about. And you can take that question in any way that you want, whether that's wanting to tell us about plot or whether you want to approach it from a different angle. But for you, what is Deviance about?
Thanks, Thammika, and thanks everyone for being here. It is, I have to say, it's a bit of a homecoming for me because I am, at my heart, a Bangalore boy. I was born right here at Bangalore Baptist Hospital, and I lived here until the age of 11. And I've always kind of carried Bangalore with me wherever I've gone. So, and Bangalore makes an entry many times, an appearance in the book as well, sometimes as the Garden City, sometimes as the Silicon Plateau. So being here among all of you today is kind of a big, big thing for me, and bringing this book to all of you readers. Deviance, as Thammika said, is the story of 3 generations of queer men in India. And they're related, like I said, they're part of the same family. They're related as uncles and nephews. When I started thinking about Deviance, the original idea was to tell the story of my generation of queer men, which was, people who were kind of young men in the late 1990s, early 2000s, the time that led up to the decriminalization of Section 377 that criminalized gay sex, the recriminalization of that in 2013, and the final decriminalization in 2018. But then the more I kind of challenged myself to think about the story, I thought that this is also a book about a community that has never not only been acknowledged and never really seen themselves in literature, on screen, on the page, but also has faced active erasure. We actually don't have queer literature in post-independence India for a very, very long time. And so I challenged myself to think about how to not make this the story of just one generation, and then fan it out to kind of talk about the people who came before my generation, what kind of sacrifices they had to make, what kind of struggles they had to kind of counter their invisibility and their erasure from society and from the legal framework that they were living in. But then I also wanted to update that narrative and talk about people today, very young people who are living their lives enabled by digital technology and finding intimacy on the internet. And what does that look like? What does post decriminalization India look like in an urban setting? And so with that brief, I kind of started to think about these three generations and them as related and being in the same family. And that's kind of where this book was really born out of. And, for a long time, I held back writing this book for both personal and mainly for personal reasons, because I thought this was such a personal book that I didn't quite know how to navigate my emotions into this. But I think when the tri-generational idea came to me, I felt like I was prepared. I thought maybe I was waiting for this idea to strike me, and that's why I was holding off writing this book.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm picking up that the trigenerational methodology, if I may call it that, from the perspective of craft and from the perspective of arrangements of voices, it meant a lot to you. It held a core meaning. As silly a question as this is, I'm curious how that container was decided. Because the moment you decide that one generation isn't enough, then your mind goes to, as a writer, should I go 2 generations? And then it goes, should I go 3? Now, I'm interested in how you made the decision to stop at 3 or to widen until 3, because as we know, queer history has such a long history. So how did you make that decision of the container of 3 generations?
Yeah. Well, I had to stop somewhere, so I did have to. I did have to draw the line somewhere. But I feel like the world has changed so much over the last 30 years, especially kind of post liberalization in India and post this technology boom, smartphones and apps and so on. And I feel like Sukumar, who is the first generation, he's a young man in the 1970s when we meet him, and then we track his life all the way until kind of the end of the last millennium. Um, but I feel like his experience would probably not be that different to somebody in the 1950s or the 1960s. So for a long time, that experience of, because it was just a veil of silence thrown over their existence. Their preferences, their kind of what they wanted out of their life, their romantic relationships was never given any space in the light of day. It was always conducted in secrecy. And so
Hello.
wow,
Hi.
we're back. But I like this. We're not going back there.
We're not going
Yeah,
back. Okay.
we're not going back there. We're doing
Hi.
this.
Thank you so much.
Nukkad Natak style.
Thank you again. So, like I was saying, this book is a book where bodies say a lot of things. Bodies do the messaging of so many things. I'd like you to share more with the audience, who I presume many people still have not yet read the book. What does the body exemplify in this book, and what do you want audiences to realize is the role of bodies in lives and society?
I think as a queer person, the first thing you become very aware of is your body. It's your body and the body that you desire. And you know that what you desire is different. It is not what you, and that kind of, that develops very quickly at a very, very young age, where you become very aware of you're different to what everybody else wants. You're attracted to something which is forbidden, and you're not supposed to talk about it. And I think the body then becomes almost a preoccupation that stays with a queer person throughout their lifetime, especially if they're in an environment that is extremely constricted, that is forbidden, that is taboo. So, therefore, I think the body became, and like you said, the body does a lot of things, and a lot of things are done to the body in this book. And I wanted never to shirk away from the primacy of the body and the physical experience. Sometimes it's sexual, and sometimes it's not, right? So I wanted to give the body that primacy of place in the book as well. In general, even like thinking about outside the queer spectrum, I think in societies such as India, the body is, we're very prudish about how we think and talk about our bodies, how we think and talk about desire. That is changing. I will say that is changing. But even now, we're very, very prudish, we're very conservative, and we are constantly censored by the powers that be to think and talk about bodies. And so in that way, this book was also an act of resistance. By putting the body at the center of it, it's saying that this is something important to be contended with. It might make you uncomfortable in places, but we do need to confront this. We can't be running away from this forever.
This might be a good time. Yeah, clap away. So this might be a good time to also let Santanu share a passage, a reading, because I think what we were talking about relates to this. Now, what's really beautiful was that we didn't plan when the reading would happen. But I think what that exemplifies is what's lovely about this book is you can carry a conversation in any direction. And ultimately, there'll be a way to weave back to a scene because what one scene does is it embeds so many ideas all at once. So I'm going to let Shantanu read this passage and maybe tell us the context of it and how it's related to what we've spoken about and whatever else you'd like to share about this beautiful piece.
Thank you. So this is from one of Mambro's passages, and it's quite standalone. So you kind of don't need to know what happens before or after. But this is where he goes to watch this film called Fire, which many of you will know. Fire is a film by Deepa Mehta. It, I think, released in 1996 when I was very young, and I went to watch it in the theater. It invited a lot of criticism, a lot of protest. Effigies of Shabana Azmi and Nandita Das were being burnt on the streets. It invited a lot of commentary as well. So this passage is about Mambro going to watch Fire in the cinema. It is during those years that you first watch Fire. You're in the theater alone that evening. Y is probably not in town, but you can't miss this movie. It won't run for long, a week at most. That is the fate of art house cinema, a Friday to Thursday schedule, near empty theaters. But this one is special because of the protests. It is the story of two women falling in love with each other, two sisters-in-law at that. How can this be allowed on screen? It is against Indian culture, our Sanskriti, our Sabhyata. So scream the saffron-clad defenders of Hinduism and the skull-cap-clad preachers of Islam and the cassock-clad practitioners of Christianity, all united for once by a common cause, a worthy distraction from all the rioting they are otherwise embroiled in against each other. You are disappointed by the calm outside the cinema. You expected mobs and flags and burning effigies, media cameras and reporters. Perhaps your attendance would be a public act of defiance. Instead, you walk in like it's any regular screening. There are only men inside, lascivious eyes and squirming buttocks, and hands rubbing crotches as the two actresses kiss, joyful hoots when the women are put in their place. A man spits at the screen when he walks out mid-movie. You will remember the perfect projectile path the saliva takes before landing on the dusty aisle. For weeks, you read everything you can find in the newspapers and magazines about Fire. It is not your induction into gay cinema. You've watched Philadelphia on Star Movies. But Fire is the first time you've watched gay people in the world you inhabit. They look like you, talk like you, live like you. The reviews are lukewarm, the commentary fierce, but there is something discomforting about the way even the supporters speak. It's women after all. They're emotional creatures. They sit at home all day waiting for their husbands. A relationship between two women is an act of resistance against the treatment meted out to them. You read and read, scavenge through everything you can find. These intellectuals pinning female attraction down to neglect and boredom. If only men treated their women better, the women wouldn't want to fuck each other. But what if same-sex love is not an act of resistance? What if that's how it is for some people? And what about men fucking men? You have so many questions, but no one to ask. So much to say, but no one you can trust. You can't talk to your parents. They haven't brought this up. Surprising for a home where politics is discussed and opinions professed on a daily basis. Talking to teachers is out of the question. You can't even get yourself to go up to the librarian and ask for Ismat Chughai's Lihaf, the short story that inspired Fire. Her books aren't on the shelves, though those of her male contemporaries are. You want to ask Mamu if he has watched the movie, but you never bring it up. You don't know how to form the words. Your language has no shared vocabulary for a conversation like this.
Thank you. So that gives you for sharing that with us. This would be a time where we do open up. We've got 10 minutes for questions and answers. So I would invite anyone who has any question to just raise their hand. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I don't know if it was intentional or just a slip, but you said something really poignant and beautiful. You said, is this better? Yeah. You said something very poignant about how, with the accrued knowledge that we have right now about the gay rights, how we can speak back to the past, because the past has oppressed us. Is that what you really mean? And that's a fantastic idea. And how would you speak back to the past, even if it's just poetic and not logistical?
I mean, I guess my way of doing that was to write this book. You know, having lived through this time, having known people from my previous generations who lived their lives in silence and are no more around to tell their stories. For me, writing this book was a way to reclaim those lost years, even though they can never be reclaimed. You know, what's gone is gone. I can never be an out and proud 16-year-old. But you know, we try and we find different ways. And for me, writing this book was also a way to process my experience, but also in a way was a grant coming out to the whole world. And I think that was me, though. And everybody has to find, you know, all of our contexts are different, so we have to find our own ways to do it. Sometimes it is a conversation with just one person. Maybe it's going back to the person who broke your heart when you were 14. Sometimes it's a conversation with your mother. You know, sometimes it's looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, I'm going to take control from now on. So it could take different shapes and forms, but, you know, we have to find our way into it. But it's high time we do it.
Thank you.
So one of the first things you mentioned that hit home with me is that it took a while for you to put this down on paper, because it entails a lot of your emotion and you don't know how to navigate that and write that on paper. So can you tell me your experience in navigating that, and how you finally decided to put it down as an aspiring writer who also would like to write my experiences of coming out and transitioning? So I would like to know about that.
Thank you. You know, we're trying to do a lot of things here, right? We're trying to tell stories that are very personal to us, stories that are possibly very painful, memories that we rather not revisit, but we do need to excavate to be able to find closure and move on. So there's the personal aspect of it. But what I also didn't want to take lightly was the fact that I am a writer and I take my craft seriously. You know, what I write, it shouldn't feel like something that I just scribbled on a piece of paper, and I shouldn't just expect the world to read some, you know, some half-baked notes of mine. So it took some time to marry the emotion and the craft of what is the best way for this to be told, what is the best voice, what are the best words. So I did a lot of work on the language, on the voicing. I had to make sure that it's difficult not to feel angry and bitter when you think about these things. But I had to do a lot of work to not let that cloud my judgment or cloud my art in a way. My art had to be free to do its own thing, if that makes sense. And so I think finding that conduit between feeling what you need to feel, but channel that into something that is quite high quality art, according to you. I mean, the world might not think that, but you need to think what you've produced is high quality. That is the work that I had to do, and I feel like that has paid off.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it definitely has
I was wondering what's your opinions and thoughts on that?
And about labeling, and it talks about the plethora of labels that we've now found ourselves in. You know, are we bisexual? Are we gay? Are we this? Are we that? Are we polyamorous? Are we doing E&M? Are we, anyway, all of that stuff, you know, I actually don't know what I feel about that, because I feel like our previous generations would have said the same about us. They would have said, why do you have these labels? Why are you calling yourself gay or lesbian or bisexual? Fine, you made out with a man, big deal, go get married to a woman. You know what I mean? So I don't want to be that guy who looks down upon the next generation just because they've discovered labels of their own. I want to almost think of this as a process of evolution. Some of these labels, if they work, if they make sense for that generation, they will stick. The ones that will not work will actually fall away. They will go away on their own. We don't need to resist them. We don't need to fight them. We have to let the next generation figure out those labels for themselves.
Can I add on to that question? So I think one thing that I have noticed is that some people, even if they're platonic and close, people just, if it's any sweet gesture, people just say, oh, that's gay. Like it's a mean thing. So what about conversations or situations like that? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, just take it as a compliment. What can I say? Sure, it is gay. They can take care of themselves. They're brave. So sure, call me gay. I'm all for it.
Thank you. And I think we have time for just that last question, and we'll have to wrap up.
I have 2 questions to ask. Sorry to annoy you, sir, but I have too many questions, but I'll end up with only 2. First one is, so as an aspiring writer, I before reading your book, I was working on I was working on writing something very personal, very deep that I wasn't able to write because it is making me like my mental health is getting worse while writing. So apart from that, there are 2 more drafts that I wanted to write, but that didn't work out because of I'm not around a millennials time. What advice would you like to give for the aspiring queer writers? And my second question is, who would you consider if Deviants was a movie? What are the 3 actors? Which 3 actors would you consider as the main protagonists? Because I've been like wondering. One of them is I'm absolutely sure that Alexander Balakrishnan would be fitted as Vivan for sure, because I keep seeing him as Vivan.
He's also on the cover of the
Yeah.
UK edition. Very good questions both. I will say about the writing and aspiring writers, please do write not at the detriment of your mental health. Please do write only when you feel ready, when you feel calm. Please do seek help if you're not feeling well. Create a social ecosystem, talk to friends, talk to people you can trust, seek professional help if you need to, and do only come to writing only when you feel ready to recount your experiences. I also will say the best trick to writing is to write for yourself. Don't think of this, when you're writing a draft, you have no idea whether this will ever see the light of day. So you are essentially always writing for yourself. And then if it goes somewhere, that's great, but that's how I do it. Like, I'm on my 3rd book now, and even now I just literally write for myself, and I have butterflies in my stomach every time I face a new, fresh page. And that's a good feeling, right? Like, it always should be something that's coming out, pushing out of your core, and then goes out into the world in whatever shape and form, whenever. We'll see about that. About the actors, I would say, if this ever gets picked up, I'd say cast completely new people. I don't want, just like this book was an attempt to undo the erasure and redo it in a completely new way. I'd want complete fresh faces who have no history on screen to be able to play these characters.
Wow. What a wonderful and powerful way to end that. Thank you so much. We have to wrap this up. But from what I understand, Santanu will be available to sign his book, right? Yes. Yes. And the book
I'm available. I don't know where we're going, but we'll figure it out.
There will be a volunteer who escorts our dear author to the book signing. So do grab a copy of Deviants, end your year with it, or start your next year with it. But just grab a copy and find our dear author there. Thank you all for the spirit. This has been the most touching
I know,
moment
this is
of
a
BLF.
one-of-a-kind session.
Yeah.
Thank you
Can
so
we
much
try,
for
like, a
being here.
selfie with them?
I'm going to come here.
Yeah? Okay.
We'll do a selfie with everyone.
Selfie with the spirit. Let's do a selfie.